on this computer. Okay, cool. So went ahead and did that. So I'm going to go ahead and move.
Berenice, you're on mute. I'm not sure if you meant to go on mute.
Yes, sorry, I did. So this slide right here is just detailing what the process is. We have 4 scheduled sessions. As you can see, they start May 18th. The content areas that we're going to be focusing on are fiscal, contracts and grants, human resources, and program governance. So again, feel free to invite those folks on your agency that are the experts if you might not necessarily be. And then we're just move along into the sessions. As you can see, they're back-to-back weekly. Last year, I believe we had 7 or 8 of these sessions. So we really tried to condense it this year just because just time, it's just a very long process. So this is why we want to make sure that we hear back from you guys in today's meeting so that we can gather all the data that you do want to see so we can have a productive conversations when it comes to these sessions in the near future.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Can you go back to the previous slide? When
Sure.
you mentioned to have you mentioned about having individuals at our agency that know this area, or
It's not something you need to do. It's just an option. If you feel comfortable, let's say, you know, for example, your expertise is not in FCE at all, family community engagement. If you want to bring in an expert on your staff that might be able to, you know, or you can even go ahead and contact them and say, hey, you know, I have a meeting on June 8th for family community engagement. Are there any, you know, possible issues that you're seeing in this area that you would like me to bring up, or any questions that you'd like me to bring up during this time? Great question.
Okay, thank you. So we can do that for all the areas, right? Like the people in our agency that specialize in those areas, we can ask them those questions, and then during each meeting, ask if they could attend or are able to, right?
Yes, Tracy. And in the next slides, like what I did is I basically, one of our data points is the survey. So I would make sure that the staff that you are talking to, that you look at that as your first data point, just maybe because you know, anything else that we're not covering in that data point, or any issues that we're not seeing based on those survey questions, you can then kind of formulate. So yes, you can definitely do that. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? These are really good. No? Okay, so I'm going to hand it over to Tiffany.
All right, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Tracy, I do think that was a great question, as Berenice had mentioned, because we want you to feel empowered when we're looking, or when we're collaborating with the self-assessment. We understand everybody at this table, right? There's an area in which maybe that you're strong in, and there may be an area in which perhaps, you know, somebody else at your organization may be stronger in. You may have a little bit of expertise in some of these areas, but in terms of being able to make recommendations on how we can strengthen the program, maybe that just isn't your forte. And so we do want to go ahead and make sure that every committee member is empowered to make sure that they can bring along the people who they feel would be a best representation for a particular service or system area that can really bring about some really great ideas on how we can move the work forward. So our first session is going to be May the 18th, and we're super excited. It's going to be jam-packed, right? Because in all of our sessions, we have multiple areas that we're going to be covering. In this first session, we're going to be covering fiscal, contracts, and grants. That's a mouthful in and of itself. That is a lot. And so There are staff, I'm sure, that are engaged in this work. I know, for instance, here at DFSS, when we're looking at who can kind of help us be able to be interviewed for a self-assessment, it isn't just one person for us, you know. And so as you're thinking about this, I want you to think about the people in your organization, right? When you're doing your own self-assessment, who would be the best people to bring about a self-assessment within your organization for fiscal contracts and grants. For the city of Chicago at DFSS in particular, I can think of 3 different people that I would want to go ahead and have be a part of this. And so I'm so happy to see my partner here, Nicole Roberts, on, because she is definitely one of those trusted sources when I think about fiscal and what we do with all of the different grants, from federally funded to state funded, to childcare as well, state funded as well. So definitely when I'm thinking about fiscal, she would definitely be the person who comes to mind. She may want you, so I would, definitely recommend inviting a Nicole Roberts to be able to help kind of facilitate the fiscal work that we're doing. And if she wanted to go ahead and bring in her accounting staff, then that's up to her. But she would definitely be able to go ahead and facilitate those conversations or the self-assessment. As it relates to contracts, contracts itself, contracts is a whole nother piece. And we actually do here at DFSS, we have a contract administrator. And so not sure if most people on this line know that we do have a contract administrator, and the contract administrator does have contract liaisons that actually are assigned depending on the particular grant or program that's being awarded. And so our contract administrator is Alpha Riley, and she would definitely be the person who I would want to interview when it relates to what we're doing with our contracts and the work that we're doing in that area. And grants as well. Grants is, we wind up having to submit annual grants. And if we have to go ahead and submit things like a COLA supplemental grant application for our federal funds, then that's a whole nother grant process. But our grants division, Raymond Barrett is the director of grants. And so he would be a great person to go ahead and make sure we're having to the table when it comes to facilitation and self-assessment. The whole self-assessment process, and I don't have to tell you guys, it really is about taking a look at the work that we're doing and trying to see, hey, what are the things that we're doing well, the things that are working for us, and what are the things that we can sit back and say, hey, I think we can do a better job here, and we really want to go ahead and be critical when it comes to the work that we're doing. So those are 3 people I've identified for fiscal contracts and grants. I'm not sure if anybody else on here wanted to make a recommendation in terms of maybe perhaps who you wanted to see. We included some of the survey questions under the other areas, but fiscal contracts and grants, just so you know, there were no survey questions, right? And so that's why it does say no survey questions. So this is an area where we know we want more participation in our self-assessment. And I would probably just about assume in a lot of organizations, the work that we're doing programmatically, sometimes when it comes to self-assessment, people look at the program side of things, and they're not necessarily looking at the fiscal or the grants or the contractual side of things, because those are the administrative functions. And so, yes, Tracy, I agree with you, asking Andy and Wanda to be a part of this work, because they work very closely when it comes to, they're my fiscal contacts. When I need to reach out to Mary Crane about anything related to fiscal, I'm not calling Tracy, I'm calling Wanda, I'm calling Andy. And so absolutely, they're definitely the people within your organization that I would say can make great recommendations. And even if they can't make it, right, we would love to have them represented, right, to be able to speak up on this particular day toward maybe system improvements that they see on their side. But even if they're telling you, say Wanda can't be there, on that date, she has another commitment, get her to go ahead and put, things that she would like to see in writing, things that she feels like the city is doing well and things that the city needs to improve on. I think that will go a long way too, you guys. And so it doesn't have to be that you have to bring them to the table. I think making sure that you're getting their points of view so that you can address them as a committee member at these particular meetings, that also works. And so the best representation is making sure that we show up and we're able to go ahead and have some meaningful conversation in these areas. And so we're going to be super, super excited. And so again, I want you all to think about and reflect on, just like Tracy did. Hey, I know who I want to bring for that particular one. And so I want you all to be thinking about that. And Amina, of course, I'm thinking about you. Kevin would be a great source, to go ahead and bring to the table when it comes to this work. But I'm pretty sure you may have others in mind. But I know he's been the one constant for me when it comes to your organization. And I'm sure others, you all can think about who you have in mind. So let me see if there's anything else in terms of people. Now, we haven't necessarily talked about what we want to see, but I did just throw out people. And so on the next slide, we'll definitely go into a little bit more detail. I just want to make sure that we got that covered. I think we do in terms of DFSS. I'm going to pause just for a second just to see if there is anything else anyone else wanted to add.
So I put in the chat, for agencies to really think about within any of these content areas or subjects or topics, what are the challenges that your agency is facing? And you might not necessarily even know that right now, but talk to some of these experts in your agency, and you can go ahead and email us. And that way we have time to gather data. I will definitely send an email with kind of a possible deadline, because it does take time to gather and then package and then share. So we want to be just mindful of that. But in case you just don't have anything right now, use the worksheet that I shared, and please send it over to us.
Thank you, Berenice. Absolutely. The next content area that will be discussed on May the 18th will be human resources. And so as we're thinking about, people within your organization who can help kind of support this work, I know for me at DFSS, when we're talking anything related to HR, Monica Rayfact is the Deputy Commissioner of Human Resources here at DFSS. And so she or her designee would be my recommendation for this area, to make sure that we're bringing them in with the self-assessment process. And so again, as you kind of reflect in your organization, think about who can kind of give you some value add in this space. And as you're doing your own self-assessment, but also as you're participating with the grantee self-assessment. So
Tiffany, sorry,
yeah,
I have a question. So if we do invite Monica Rayfact, what would be some of the questions we would want to ask her? Like, is there anyone here?
I would want her to be, I would want her to be interviewed. So for instance, when I think about even governance is what, kind of the next topic was, personnel policies and procedures is something that should be presented to your governing bodies on an annual basis, and those types of things. So just tying into some of the responsibilities that HR has in your federally funded programs, and thinking about kind of, are we doing these things, right? I think for me, that's what I'm thinking about. But there's definitely other topics here that may not necessarily require, in our opinion, right, it may not necessarily require a Monica Rayfact, because for instance, one of the very first questions, it says, describe how the agency is supporting and providing staff wellness supports and resources to ensure health and safety of children. Monica's not going to be able to tell us necessarily about what's happening at the agency. She can go ahead and kind of be a spokesperson for what's happening at DFSS. And so I think that when we're looking at HR and we're looking at how we monitor our agencies in that area, then you still have to go back to then our PDM kind of resources, because HR falls under program design and management. And so Elaine Millsap Parker would be the best representation of the monitoring that we're doing in HR. But if others had any other suggestions, let me know. Okay, all righty. So yeah, so I would definitely say from a DFSS standpoint, Monica, but I would say from us monitoring our agencies that we want to go ahead and make sure that we have Elaine Millsap Parker to the table. And these are some great questions. Again, these are survey questions. And, you know, if we're thinking about our challenges in this area, I know Tracy put in the comments staffing. And, you know, I don't know anybody who can't say that there's, you know, some challenges in that area. I've heard it time and time again. And so, you know, how we've had to pivot in the pandemic when it comes to staffing shortages, having to ensure, you know, maintaining constant group sizes with the pandemic, making sure social distancing, trying to keep people, you know, in those key positions in those classrooms has been a challenge. I know some organizations have, you know, created sign-on bonuses and things like that to really kind of attract talent. But really that pipeline is, you know, it's really kind of growing that pipeline and thinking about the things that we can do to make sure that there's going to be a pool of educators to even pull from. And so staffing has certainly been a challenge all the way around. The hiring process itself, you know, we pivoted, you know, prior to the pandemic, when you think about, you know, your hiring process, I mean, you know, back before the pandemic, we weren't having virtual interviews, you know, and so nowadays, you know, people are absolutely open to having virtual interviews and having that process be facilitated that way, and just trying to figure out and find new ways of trying to onboard staff. And so I'm sure that there's been other challenges that you've experienced because of COVID-19, and kind of what does that look like for you and your organization? What does it look like for us and, you know, in ours, and how can we go ahead and kind of speak to that, to talk about some of the ways in which we've had to pivot to still be able to kind of keep the show going, but at the same time, the things that may need to be tweaked or may need to, you know, may need some system improvements. And so we really want, you know, to be able to have those meaningful discussions during those interviews about human resources. And I just want to stop right there just to see if anybody else had anything in terms of human resources that really kind of hit for you, because like I said, I think staffing is consistent across the board. Okay. All right. So we're going to go into governance. And so when we're thinking about governance and who's going to be the best representation of what governance is, and you know, I always like to go ahead and talk about kind of, you know, we have our policy councils and policy committees, but then we also have our boards, right? And so when we're thinking about governance, we are talking about both arms of that, but even within your policy council, your policy committee, and also your parent committee, right? Right, there's going to be 3 different layers there. And so, you know, how are we facilitating? The questions for program governance, you see them there. It mainly is talking about, you know, the roles and responsibilities, you know, across from policy committees and also our governing bodies. But at the same time, you know, that information still should be trickling up and it should be trickling down. And we should be able to see documentation and evidence of that in, you know, in those, in the documentation that actually supports those particular meetings. I know that we've had to create a shift during the pandemic, and a lot of our meetings have moved to virtual. In doing that shift, we also had to make sure that we've updated bylaws and things like that to ensure that the bylaws actually state that you're able to hold virtual meetings. Believe it or not, when the pandemic first started, I think a lot of people were surprised by their bylaws. People start having meetings virtually and then realized that some meetings were some bylaws are very restrictive Some bylaws may have stated that, that you met every fourth Wednesday, but at this location. And so some bylaws were that restrictive where it actually named the place where you were meeting. And it maybe even stated that they were in-person meetings. You know, and when the pandemic happened and people needed to go ahead and pivot, then bylaws needed to be updated, et cetera, in order to make sure that we were going to be in compliance. So as we're thinking about governance and how we've had to go ahead and make a shift and the challenges that we have faced when it comes to program governance, we really want some honest feedback on things that we've done well and things that can definitely use some improvement within the system. And, again, if this is your area of expertise, we welcome you to go ahead and kind of let us know kind of what you're thinking. And if it's not, we want to make sure that we're getting some input from the person within your organization who's going to be able to be a value add in this space. But I do want to stop there and just see if there's any, if you're thinking any particular thing that's going to be relevant or valuable when we're talking about program governance. Maybe there's some questions that you wanted to ask, something that you wanted to make sure that we covered. Tracy?
Yeah, so I don't know about other agencies, but I know since the pandemic, our parent policy committee meetings have improved tremendously. And I say this as far as attendance goes, I always have the representative from each location and each program. And that's because it's virtual. So is there something that is going to state, or we expected that the bylaws, when when we are thinking about the questions for program governance, and I bring this up because of the template that we had to complete, is this something that the agencies are going to be allowed to keep in place, where we are going to, for example, just an example for me, my May meeting is going to be half and half. The parents that can come will come, and the ones that cannot come will join virtually. So with that being said, is that going to be something that's allowed? Do the agencies are we looking for that stuff in the bylaws?
So I'm interested in knowing kind of what other people feel about that. I have a response, but, I'm interested in seeing what others have to say. Do we have anybody else who maybe feels some type of way about that particular, what's happening within your organization?
Yes, this is at the Y. And I think the first year we were virtual, we had like a quorum at every single meeting and virtual meeting, which was a tremendous improvement over the previous years. And so I'm a fan. We're also able to make our meetings shorter. It takes us less time. I mean, we don't start on time. We're still waiting for people, but they start much sooner than they did before. And we're actually able to do multiple meetings. Like we might do a training at a different time, which also brings in a lot of parents. So I'm a fan. I think we do need once we can do more in person, we can do some in person, but I really see a tremendous value in doing it. A challenge though has been in getting signatures and people sign. So I would like to see something that says what kind of signatures will be acceptable, because we got multiple people signing multiple documents, when you can get them to sign multiple documents and things like that. So if we get some kind of standard, what's an acceptable sign off, I think that would be helpful. But I think I think that's meeting parents where they are. They don't have childcare issues. We're not, keeping them out late at night and for multiple sites, bringing people long distances to a particular site for a meeting.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's the bomb. So I love it.
We have anybody else? Don't be shy. You guys can come off that mute button.
I
Jade,
echo.
I see your
I
comment,
echo what
Jade.
the
Thank you for
other
that.
ladies-
Hi, Ms. Purnell, go ahead.
Good morning. I agree with the other ladies as well. We have had a tremendous response with virtual parent meetings, as well as finding other people to participate, the presenters. We've been able to provide more resources virtually for the virtual parent meetings as well. So I also support the hybrid model. So for those that want to come in, I think it's just providing more options for parents, because some parents prefer to come in person, where you do have more that's able to, if they know ahead of time, they're able to make arrangements if they're at work and things like that. So it's definitely convenient, and I agree with it's meeting parents where they are. It provides more options.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that, Ms. Purnell. I agree with everything that Tracy, Ms. Pleasance, and also you, right, that you guys have had to say. And I think that, to answer Tracy's question in terms of, what DFSS would require, the Head Start program performance standards does not require whether it's an in-person or if it's a virtual meeting, right? It just says we have to have it. And I think that one of the things that we can do to make sure that we're meeting parents where they are, exactly where they want to be, is we should survey our parents on an annual basis, in my opinion. Hear from the parents themselves. What do they want? And so if they would like to go, and if they, go ahead and vote to go ahead and keep it virtual, I say keep it virtual. If they vote for a hybrid model, go ahead and, do a hybrid model. And if they vote for in-person, then respect their decision. I think that, a part of meeting parents where they are and what they need from us, it may vary from year to year. And I think that we want to make sure that we're getting that input and that buy-in from them, because that will make them, show up. That will make sure that you get that quorum that you need, that you're getting that participation. And I love what Ms. Pleasant said about, being able to shorten the meeting. We can get straight to the point. Folks didn't have to travel to get here. They didn't have to, they weren't on a bus or having to drive and waste gas. Gas, $6 a gallon. I don't know about y'all, but I'm bothered. Okay, I'm bothered. And so if folks can go ahead and log on from where they are, and they can be active participants, and we all can go ahead and go about carrying on the business that we need to do. And it has to be effective, right? That's the other thing, right? We have to make sure that it's going to be effective, a method of effective participation. And so, we know that there are challenges sometimes with technology. And so as long as we're able to actually facilitate growth in that space, I don't see DFSS requiring an in-person meeting. I think that we want to respect those parents at each individual organization. Like I said, I would just say on an annual basis, go ahead and survey parents, and you let that be your justification as to how you're going to move forward. But great. I think that is great. I think that Ms. Pleasance also brought up a very good point about those signatures. And so what I heard her say is that maybe there needs to be something definitive from DFSS to say, hey, this is what we're gonna, what's acceptable. I know just from, my experience in my role, that because we have been accepting more of, there's been instances, well, let me say that, there's been instances where we accept the signature, a virtual signature, or I approve of something, like with our grant applications. We ask for that email, print the email, right? And go ahead and attach it so that we know that when you write in that person's name, that then you attach also the email to show that that particular member did actually approve. And so that type of documentation has been accepted. But there has also been times in our operations where we needed that live signature. And I know even in our office where we've had to, go run over to so-and-so's parents' home just to go ahead and get that live signature, and how inconvenient is that? And so I would like to go ahead and explore that too, in terms of what's going to be acceptable moving forward. Yep, Mr. Ortega.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Tiffany. Good morning. My name is Guillermo Ortega of Family Services. I'm Parent Engagement Supervisor in one of our centers in El Valor. Yeah, but yeah, I was hearing about how wonderful was the the participation online virtually to the parent meeting and the policy council meetings. But here we here in El Valor, actually we have a big challenge for in the beginning virtually. I think especially I think our communities sometimes they have challenges with equipment, the computers and using computers, and virtually meetings like Zoom, like Teams, any other platforms we are using since the pandemic. But yeah, we used to have a little more attendance in person when we have the meetings in person. So we face some challenges, in helping parents, inviting parents to participate in the meetings, to keep participating in the meetings virtually. So, but especially for parent meetings, we have a good participation virtually, but we used to have like double in person. And for policy council, yeah, we have we experienced some challenges during the pandemic. I think by now parents are doing better virtually, but we are still missing the in-person meetings actually.
I'm so glad you said that, Mr. Ortega. I agree. There's some aspects of it which is absolutely working. And when it comes to socialization, just like we talk about socialization with children, parents need it too. They need to go ahead and connect with other adults, and more so than just being in our home. Sometimes we do have to get out, right? We do have to get out and do things and connect with people. And so I would say, I totally understand that. I think, there's been times even in our meetings when, we've done like Zoom trainings where we've had to train our parents so that they know how to go ahead and work these Zoom features, so that they understand how to vote when we're doing virtual meetings and those types of things. And you'll be surprised how difficult it is for somebody to even get themselves off mute. I'm sure you guys have been in those situations. Matter of fact, look, we've been in work situations and it's like, oh, mute, I don't know, this mute button, I don't know, it just disappears on me, and so totally understand, totally agree. And that's why still I want to go back to the point of making sure that it's parent choice. Let parents decide for themselves what they want. And I would say, you can always stand by that. As a staff person, I wouldn't want to make the decision for parents. I would want them to go ahead and make the decision for themselves. And I think that as staff, we can always make sure that we throw in pros and cons of, based on previous, the last 2 years in a pandemic, these are some of the highlights, but these are some of the lowlights, right? We want to go ahead and highlight that for them. So that way they're making an informed decision, that's going to be best for them, considering all of what's been presented to them. Jade?
Hey, I just want us to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying in regards to surveying the parents as to what they choose to do. So I work on representing Kids Above All, and we have surveyed our parents, their preference for when we did return to in-person. What did they prefer, in-person visits or virtual visits? I personally work for both of our West and South Side. And I can say that on our West Side, majority of our parents did vote for in-person visits versus our parents on the South Side that voted for staying virtual. I would say also the parent participation with our group meetings via virtual was more than when we had group meetings in the summertime. The participation in the summertime when we had them like at a park, it was less. It was like 1 or 2 parents versus if we have them virtual, it's like 15 plus parents involved in our meetings virtually versus in person. But on the West Side, it was kind of the same, like the participation versus virtual groups and in person. But I would say to survey the parents, I agree with that as well, because we've done that. And it's around that time where we're about to survey them again to see what their preference is.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's going to vary, and I think respectfully so. You know, I know that we really want to make it about parent choice. We really do, and like I said, and that can change from year to year depending on who's in office and who's not. So, all right. So I'm glad.
Yes.
I'm loving this discussion about governance, Berenice.
Yes, I just wanted to kind of repeat what folks are saying. I've noted that signatures are a challenge. So what we will do on our end is kind of take a closer look at maybe what are some of the options and what's possible. And we can bring that back into our May 18th meeting. And also, you know, what are options for agencies, whether it's virtual, in person, or possibly even a hybrid if agencies are able to do that, and what it would look like. So we can look at that and present it on the 18th, just because this is a great conversation that we're having, but we do have just a few more, and we have about 40 minutes left. But I've noted these things down. Thank you.
Yeah, and I also wanted to go ahead and mention in the chat, and thanks Jade, and thanks Amina for your suggestions regarding signatures and how we can get them. And so nowadays, yeah, we can definitely get into the 21st century here. And so DocuSign is something that's available and out there, and maybe organizations are using it. I know for the city of Chicago, we are not, but I definitely want to go ahead and make sure that we're notating those types of things. And then Amina mentioned the Adobe Pro having the live signature function as well. And so those are things that we'll definitely take into consideration. But I appreciate you guys for your suggestions. This is great. Next slide. All right. So when we look at our second session, and like Berenice said, that these are going to be like a week apart, right? And so we're really going to hit it. Once we get into May, it's going to be like full steam ahead here. And so, you know, that very first session, you know, as you all can see, we kind of jammed a lot in that one. And this is going to be every session, right? There's going to be a lot. And so this particular one, it's going to cover data, record keeping, and reporting. And so, wow, huge. I think from the city of Chicago's perspective, when I look at like data, for me, I can't bring somebody to the table without bringing Craig Zemke, right? Craig is the supervisor of data, and we would definitely need his input. However, it's not just Craig alone, because Craig is primarily, and people know Craig, you know, and they kind of almost associate it simultaneously when you think about our data system, right? You think Craig. But in addition to that, right, that's not the only type of data that we need to look at. There's data that sits outside of our data system. And so that's, for instance, like TSG, our Teaching Strategies Gold data. And so I would also say William Hill, our Assistant Director of Quality and Development, he also needs to be brought to the table because he'll have the data for TSG, and he'll also have data for like Teachstone, right? That professional development piece with our staff. And so I think that a combination of those two for DFSS would definitely get us to a good place in terms of being able to interview and being able to have some meaningful conversations about processes, what's going well, what needs to be improved. So wanted to see if there was any other recommendations for data and record keeping, something that I may be missing. All right. Silence is golden. Ursia. So Ursia, I love Ursi, you know, because you can say Ursi or you can say Ursia. It just all depends on how you want to roll, you know? And so, but we all know that we're talking about that eligibility, recruitment, selection, enrollment, and attendance piece, right? And that's huge in and of itself. It covers a lot. And when it comes to, there's certain elements of Ursia that, again, I would pull Craig in from a data perspective, but there's also an Ursia monitoring team that we have here at DFSS. And so they monitor in this area where we have subject matter experts who are focused on this work. And so I would definitely bring, under Elaine's leadership, I would bring, for instance, like a Nicole Randolph and also Jacinta Passament. I would bring them to the table. Hasi, I know you're on. Does that sound about right? Let me know.
Yes, that sounds about right.
Okay, great. I'm like, look, I want you like, look, Tiffany, you just throwing me on in there. Want to make sure I'm throwing the right folks in, okay?
Yep, yep, that's good.
Okay, all right, good deal. And so, yeah, we want to make sure that we're talking to the right people, right, who can give us the best information about things that we're doing well and things, again, that can be improved with our system. And so when we're talking about having those interviews, it's nothing like having an interview and not having the right person being interviewed, right? And so we definitely want to make sure that we get that right. And then program management. We used to call it program design and management back in the day under the old performance standards, under this performance standard, however it is called program management. But even under this piece, again, our monitoring team under Elaine's leadership, I would definitely call Elaine to the table to be able to help speak to program management. And she may bring her designees with her as well, but I would definitely go ahead and make sure that I'm bringing her to the table in terms of what we're doing in the space to be able to support our agencies in this area. Just wanted to pause there because we do have agencies who, you know, you understand from DFSS who your points of contact are. Just wanted to make sure that I'm being fair in this space to go ahead and give you room if there's something in particular that really kind of jumps out at you in terms of what you're looking to see from any of these content areas on May the 25th.
Yes, I want to piggyback on that. Just first, agency staff to really think about what are the challenges that your agency is facing in terms of these content areas. And that way, that can help you kind of think about what data do we need to see so we can dive into looking at these challenges and hopefully come up with those recommendations.
Don't be too shy now, you know, and when we think about, you know, again, data record keeping and reporting, you know, I'm almost waiting on somebody to jump out here. So let me go ahead and put something out into the atmosphere, right? And maybe this might spark some conversation. And let me see by show of hands, people who have been around before COPA. Before COPA. Okay. I see, yep, I see quite a few. I see quite a few, okay.
I need to remove my hand on that one, sorry.
That's okay, that's okay. Somebody probably undercounted anyway, so. Look, here, there you go. I'll go ahead and be that hand. And so I remember before we had COPA, when we were actually submitting, remember those triple forms? They were the MERs that they had to be handwritten, and they will go through all three like color copies. You had the white one on top, you had the pink one in the middle, and I think the bottom was like yellow. And so when you go through, you know, you had three different layers to this, right, in terms of submitting that monthly MER. I say that to say that we're in a period of transition. And so we've had COPA for, I believe 17 years. It's been over 15 years. We've had it for a long time. It's been over 15 years. And we're embarking on a new system. And so as we're thinking about our data system for record keeping and reporting, right? Our student information system, our family information system, we're keeping HR information in there. You know, we're thinking about the system that we're using and how this is helping us in our programming, right? Are there some improvements that we can see in terms of what we would want to get out of a new system that we know that this current system that we used for so many years maybe isn't doing for us? If there's anything, Tracy?
So like for monitoring, like for example, with us, staffing is an issue. Like even myself and Durbert go into the classrooms to help out. And so with that being said, monitoring. A lot of times it's going on COPA and pulling reports and like literally pulling the report saying, this is the report on this day at this time, look, this is what's needed, having to do it that way in order to make sure that it gets done. But then it's almost like each report is missing something. And so you can ask for certain things, you know, but then, for example, there's certain reports that because people name them within like the 800N reports where you can click on them and see what those reports look like to see what kind of data you would be able to use. But it just seems like when it comes to certain things, there's something that's always missing. And so, you know, and I remember the 100-page HISFIS that we used to have to do. So, you know, there's things where it really helps. But then again, the other thing that I remember about when COPA came out, we were literally given a week to take all the files and get them into the system. And so that was one of the biggest things that we asked when we talked about the new system is it going to integrate into the new system, or is it where we're going to have to manually do a lot of it again, which with any new system, we know we have to do some manual stuff, but to try to, I think the biggest excitement, and because we're going through self-assessment here as we speak, is knowing that we're going to get a system and hoping that that system will give us those missing pieces to help monitoring be easier, because staffing is an issue and there's times where we have to go in the classroom. But if the monitoring, if the system makes it the monitoring a little easier, then that would, you know, I feel like that will help us all the way around.
Heard, Tracy. I tell you, and if I haven't already put you on one of those groups, I'm gonna need you to help us give input though to the developers, right? You know, we're in the process of building out this new system. And so when you get invited to those meetings, please come and be as detailed as you need to be to go ahead and convey what it is that you need. I really want people who understand. And so from a monitoring perspective, like you mentioned, if I have to go in this classroom, I need something quick that I don't have to flip through so many reports, this, that, and the other, or I don't have to go ahead and create a smart report, you know, that may take me a little bit of time to try and get this element and that element together in order to create a custom report, you know, that you need something that's gonna, you know, be able to kind of get the job done quicker, that's gonna be more efficient for you when you're looking at your monitoring. So yeah, absolutely, I hear you. We're gonna definitely.
I'm in the meeting
to the table
today at 11.
Okay, good.
So that's why I was like, wait a minute, is this meeting over?
I'm probably in that one too, Tracy.
Okay.
But it's not just about that, right? I want us to think about, so some of the questions that are listed here, right? For instance, how has COVID impacted the classroom environment, staffing patterns, data entry requirements? So when we're thinking about, you know, on that end of it too, maybe, you know, data entry into the system has gotten slow because of the pandemic, right? Maybe, you know, some other things have been affected because the classroom environment has been affected, you know. But just kind of think about, you know, it mentions staffing patterns. I know probably that is going to be the theme of this self-assessment is staffing, but definitely think about these other areas as these areas too that are mentioned here as questions. They were a part of the survey, right, that was provided. So let's kind of get those creative juices to flying when it comes to this particular area. Likewise with URSEA, right? There's a lot of different ways that we can take it. But for instance, I'm going to go ahead and look at the very first question, right? It says, what is the most common barrier to sustaining effective recruitment practices? And so, you know, if we're thinking about our recruitment practices, the fact that we've been going through a pandemic, what has changed? You know, how has our approach changed? You know, or has it? You know, are we relying more on our website? Have we polished up the website? Are we making sure that it's up to date and current? You know, are we doing anything creative to ensure that people know that our doors are open and we're ready to go ahead and receive them? You know, what are we doing in this space? And so, again, the questions are here, but I really want us to be reflective, right? To really kind of get at what do we need? What are some things that we want to look at? How can we help better? the URSEA component. Are there any takers? Amina?
I think one of the things that I was thinking is that given the fact that I got a little bit of feedback here, that we are moving into a new system for the application. I think there's some things that we can add here to allow us to kind of understand and see how it's worked for us, or any challenges that we might have experienced and how we working through that. More specifically, I'm also thinking, once families fill out an application, how quickly do we respond to families on waiting lists? Because I'm assuming we'll have to hurry and convert those over to actual applications. So just one thing to think about is how the new system will affect, our practices and how we're working.
I'm glad you just mentioned application. So Amina just mentioned something that, so the new application, right? And so we're going to actually have a new application this year, and it's going to be in partnership with Chicago Public Schools. And that application platform is going to be through the School Mint, And so that is different than what we're building out in terms of the replacement for our data system. And so those are two different projects going on simultaneously, all of what will affect URSEA, right? How we get parents on the front end through through the universal application, and then that information then being fed into our data system, right? There's going to have to be an API, some type of connection that's going to then, once an offer is made, be able to connect that then to our system. This will be the first year, and for those who have been around when there's been systematic changes like this, then we also understand that we're doing everything that we can to go ahead and ensure. I hear you, Mina. We're trying to make sure we do everything that we can to try and make this a smooth transition. And that includes, testing. We're in the process of doing end-to-end testing right now. And after that, then we'll go into UAT, which is our user acceptance testing as well. But we're trying our best. We're actually bringing organizations to the table. And I love the fact that Tracy mentioned that she has a meeting with us to be able to kind of help us out in this space. But because a lot of it is that we can't do the testing that we need to do until we understand how it affects the user experience. And so, you guys will be end users in the system, and some of you may have admin responsibilities within, the data system, and we want to make sure that you're going to be a part of that testing. And so we've invited a lot of people to help support the work to ensure that what we're going to be putting out is going to be something that that hopefully, fingers crossed here, hopefully we have a good run, that good first run without having to make a lot of kinks and correction too. So this is definitely coming. It's coming soon. And so thank you, Amina, for mentioning the fact that the application. The other thing about the application, which is a systematic improvement, is this application is not just a preschool application. In the past, it was simply preschool. And so I do want to say that in terms of system improvement, this will now be an application that will be from birth through 5. It will be a birth through 5 application. And so we're super excited about that. So even our pregnant moms and our pregnant moms program, our doula programs, et cetera, they will be able to go ahead and apply for a seat in their program, the program of choice. And so we're super excited about that. And this will be the first year where we've actually offered an application for infant toddlers. So yay, a win. How fitting to go ahead and talk about it during self-assessment, because that is definitely something where we're making system improvements in terms of data, but also in how we're looking at the whole eligibility piece and selection process, because a lot of what's going to be built into the application to be even able to offer, to even make an offer, is going to making sure that we have that selection piece well built out to define what our requirements are for our various programs. So a lot of work to do, and program design and management, of course. You see the questions there. And we just want to make sure that we're going to be able to have some good dialogue and obviously, some good interviews that really kind of come out of this so we can, determine, again, what's working well and the things that we need to improve. Next slide. All right. So session 3 is going to be June the 1st, and it's going to cover, they're huge areas. And so it's health and safety for us. And so health includes mental health, nutrition, and also dental. We have a director, B. Nichols. She is our health and safety director. And so she will be the primary person that we're going to be bringing to the table when it comes to representation on our end. B has been around a long time to be able to, speak up to what we're doing out there for our organizations. But I want to hone in on the very first question that was being asked because, by way of you receiving funding through DFSS, whether it is ECDG funding, which we provided GEARS funding last year for those center-based programs, and also CARES funding for all of our federal programs. One of the very first questions, it really wants to understand, how did you use the funds? And so as we're thinking about, what were some of the challenges that we faced when using those funds, whether that was, a delay in a contract, that kind of caused the delay in you being able to spend the funds, or if it was because maybe, it was very difficult to go ahead and get items shipped in bulk. There was a supply and shortage issue when it came to certain items that were trying to be ordered. I know when it came to bleach at one point, even bleach was a hot commodity, and it was very hard to even get things like bleach, wipes, especially like those Clorox kind of wipes. We had a point within this pandemic, right, where things that we really needed had dried up. And so I want us to think about, how do we use our money? Did we fully expend our dollars in this space? How did the money or the grants that we received, how did they affect our program and what we were able to accomplish with it? And, the things that we could have just done a better job at, right? But there's a lot of things that are just outside of our control. And I know I've heard from some of you about just, for instance, when it came to materials and supplies. We may have had contractors who were set to do certain things within our organization, and they couldn't get the material shipped. Perhaps it was materials that were being shipped, from a distant location, and they just couldn't get them in on time. And so, again, when you're thinking about GEARS and CARES, which were those additional dollars that were provided in response to COVID-19, was it useful in meeting those health and safety needs for our staff, parents, and children? I want you to think about that. So PPE could be one of those things, but there's other things outside of PPE, enhanced cleanings, temperature checks. I know some people install temperature stations to be able to kind of take those hands-free systems and those types of things to really kind of create safe environments, but really kind of think about that question. Wanted to open it up just to see if there was any feedback regarding health and safety and maybe something that you want to see in terms of documentation. Okay. All right, kind of quiet on that one. But health and safety is a big area, and obviously we're going to do our due diligence in this area. I know that there were some changes that we've made to our boilerplate contracts. I'm going to throw it out there for everybody to know that we did change, like, the reporting requirements. That is something that was changed to make sure that when we talked about, like, reporting incidents, when it comes to, safety concerns, those types of things, that we did it within, well, the language in the contract has been changed to say immediately, and immediately was defined as same day. And so that is actually written in all of the contracts now, all of the federal contracts that we've executed. is same day reporting requirements. And that's important for everybody to understand that we're taking we've always taken a serious stance, but we're taking even a more serious stance to go ahead and actually put it in everyone's contract to make sure that everybody understands that we take health and safety very seriously. And if something happens within your organization that needs to be reported up to your funder, that you have to do that same day in order for you to be compliant with your grant. So thank you, Berenice. She said, please feel free to email us any data requests that you have for health and safety, because we know that there's some. Maybe you can't think of it right now, but definitely if there are some data requests, we want you to be open to go ahead and make that. Next slide. Oh, it disappeared.
Sorry, let me see. I'm usually not a driver here, but give me one moment.
No problem. Well, the city skyline looks beautiful. All right. So our fourth session, and this will be the last session, it's on June the 8th, and the content areas will be disabilities, education, and family community engagement. And so in terms of people that I would want to bring to the table from DFSS perspective, B and also Gina would be the two people that I would want to bring to the table. Gina actually, she is funded by DFSS, but she is by way of Chicago Public Schools. And so she works for the LEA, even though she's works on this particular project on a full-time basis, but she is one of the people when it comes to disability services, I would definitely want to bring her to the table. She's definitely insightful. And I also still say B because she reports to B, and we want to make sure that we have the best representation to the table when it comes to interviewing in this space. When it comes to education, I want to make sure that Elaine, she will go ahead and designate who she wants to go ahead and represent. Go ahead and represent us as far as education is concerned. So we'll have a subject matter expert that she will designate. Family community engagement, I would definitely say it's probably going to be a combination because we do have FCE staff who also are on our monitoring team. And so we still want to get Elaine involved to go ahead and designate from that end of it, but also William Hill is going to be valuable in this space as family and community engagement. He's starting to work with our support service vendor in this space. So those would be the recommendations that I have for these particular content areas. But as you're thinking about at your organization, tying this back, making it, you may be that person. I'm not sure, is this your area? If not, who are you going to be reaching out to in order to go ahead and make sure that you're able to make the best recommendations about how you've been serviced in this space? So just want to go ahead and open it up to see if we had any ideas about maybe what we would like to see, any data in particular that you feel would be important to you as it relates to these particular content areas.
For the education piece, I think that if we have the education outcomes report from when everything was virtual, and then compare them to what they look like now, just to see a difference. I only say that because like for ours, there's a big jump. And so maybe that's something that we could look at just to get a better understanding, like here where it says, continuing to learn in a virtual environment, is it effective or was it not effective? And was it more based on not participating when it was virtual, or was it more that the children couldn't engage because it was I know for us, there was some children that was really hard to get them to engage during the daily group sessions that they would have, because they don't go outside, so they just see their friends in the computer and they're excited to see their friends while the teachers are trying to do stuff to try to pull observations and stuff like that. So just something to think about.
Oh, absolutely, Tracy. And I think that you bring up a very valuable point. We do have to think about, as we're assessing, right? We do have to think about the remote learning period that we had. I think most of our centers now, they're definitely in person, but a part of the self-assessment period is us thinking about the past, right? What happened there, right?
Mhm.
How can we go ahead and make sure we're going to move forward in a better light? And there
Mhm.
was some disadvantages to, you know, remote learning in practice, you know, especially when you're trying to do any type of an assessment, observation, you know, and just trying to even retain someone's attention virtually, adults and children. So definitely were some challenges in that space. And so we want to make sure that we're bringing those things to the forefront. But are there any others? What about FCE? That's okay. Can't think of it now. It may hit you later. And, you know, with any of these areas, one of the things we want you to do is be reflective and think about things that you would want to see. The reason why we're asking you in advance is because once we actually get to these session dates, we want to be able to put something in front of you that you can actually reflect, take a look, and be able to judge for yourself, you know, to see how well or not we're doing in this space. And so a part of this is really being able to take a look at the different tools that we have access to. And so we want to be transparent in that. And so if you think of something, it doesn't have to be right now in this moment, but Berenice, she can put her her information in the chat. And so feel free to go ahead and email her directly if there's things that you know, you kind of look and you're like, okay, you know what, I think this is going to be helpful to the self-assessment committee as we move forward. Send her an email. We definitely would appreciate that. All right.
Yes, and just to piggy off on that, Tiffany, you know, the way that we've been trying to phrase these questions of, you know, what challenges is your agency facing in these content areas really talks or shows us how CSD DFSS is doing their job, right? What are the systematic issues that we might be facing? And so that's maybe the kind of lens that we want you to use. You know, what are the systematic challenges that your agency is facing within these content areas? Because that will show us or tell us, you know, what are the challenges we are also facing as an organization.
I just want to bring up one of our things when you asked about disability. So we have, based on our Head Start slots, we have a very high percentage of children with IEPs, and we have about, I think, 9 more in the process on top of the amount we already have. And I think one of the biggest challenges with that is staffing. And I say this because not just the fact that we need staff, but it's also like we had to sit back and look at, like, for example, for one particular site, we just hired on another paraprofessional because we have to, because of the amount of IEPs, to be able to try to avoid teacher burnout as much as possible, but be able to give the children also as much one-on-one support. I think that's one of the biggest challenges for us is the amount of IEPs that we are getting now and the adaptations we have to make as an agency to be able to help and support that. So
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, Tracy, and I'm glad that you said it so that everybody can understand, because they may be feeling the same strain as well, right? And so you guys do have a high rate of children with disabilities that you serve. And I know that when DFSS used to fund a couple of paras at each one of our agencies, that was very helpful for you guys. What I'm going to say to you and everybody within the sound of my voice is understanding that there are certain things that we can still provide supplemental funds for. Staffing is not one of those things that we want to go ahead and provide supplementals for, just so you know. Health and safety is. And so what I would go ahead and urge you to do is go ahead and at least write our deputy commissioner and, you know, write her in a formal way on your letterhead and make sure that it's signed by the authorized official, but really being able to talk about the health and safety, you know, things that have been diminished, right, as a result of you not having this in place. You guys have been very good stewards of your money. And I'm going to tell you, you know, folks who have not been good stewards of their money and they can't spend their grant 100%, they might as well not look to get any additional dollars. But I think that those who have shown that they have a track record of being able to expend the dollars, when you look at those things that you need, health and safety wise. And so don't make it more about, yes, the position, this is what you need, but definitely be able to connect it to the health and safety concern as to why you need that third body, right? Why you need to have that additional help and support with somebody who's trained to be able to support certain behaviors in the classroom and things like that. And so that's what I would ask that you go ahead and focus on when you're writing the deputy, asking for additional dollars to help support your program. All right. Okay. Are there any others? This has been great. Oh my gosh. Okay, so everybody understands we're going to have 4 different sessions. At the sessions, we really want to be able to make sure that they're going to be meaningful, right? And that we're bringing together all of these different areas. They're really going to be 1 week apart from one another. We want to go ahead and be hyper-focused. You take nothing away, make sure that you know these content areas that are coming, because we want you to come prepared. As a part of the self-assessment committee, a part of your homework is making sure that when we have a session that you've already came prepared to be able to, you know, have a thorough, you know, look, there's going to be, you know, opportunities to have people interview who are experts in this space. And we want to be fair to everybody by making sure that we come prepared with pre-thought out questions and things like that, that we're actually having data that we can reflect on. And if there's anybody from your organization who maybe is the subject matter expert, they can be your proxy. They can, or they can come with you, or they can at least give you some tools to work with, right? Maybe there's information they're going to give you. Hey, when it comes to contract, why are my contracts taking so dang on long? Let's find out that, you know, whatever the case may be, we want you to really be thoughtful going into each one of these sessions to be prepared. So make sure that you have your homework, whether you're connecting with your organizations and getting their feedback to bring back to this meeting. But it's going to be important that we're prepared in order to have a really, really awesome self-assessment this year. So we appreciate all of you for volunteering to do this great work that we're doing. I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to, I don't know who I'm passing it to.
No, I'll go ahead and take it. I'll go ahead and take it. I'm going to interject just for a little bit because we have about 5 minutes left. You know, as Tiffany was saying, we definitely want to make these sessions very productive because we have just this process once a year, and that's really it. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to send out an email and kind of give each of these content areas, these 4 session groups, maybe a week where you really can talk to your staff, your fiscal, contracts, HR, program staff, and come up with any data requests. And so we'll open it up for a week, and we'll hopefully hear back from you all. And then it'll give us time to gather that data and package it and make sure it's ready for May 18th. And then we'll do the same thing for this session too. We'll ask for that we can focus on talking to your agency staff that knows about data, record keeping, reporting, your CO, program design and management. And then, you know, any data requests you have, you can go ahead and share it, send it to us, and we'll make sure we have that ready for May 25th, and so on and so forth for the remaining 2 sessions. So we'll do that just because I know sometimes it's difficult. Maybe you didn't get to, you know, thinking about your data requests. So we definitely want to make sure we have that, and we have the time. So we'll use that to our advantage.
All right, so self-assessment updates. We're going to go ahead and go through these. Let me try and make it a little bigger for me here.
You know, Tiffany, I know that you're jumping into another meeting, so is Tracy, and we want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I did go ahead and share the updates with folks. If you have questions, please send us an email. There's quite a bit of information. There was a staff member who also mentioned, I'd like to see maybe a description of what these updates are. So you'll see in this slide right here, Elaine, I believe, filled it out. She mentioned that it's in progress for Q2, and then her report out is a training was provided to the agency and staff participants on the home visiting, home base requirements for the PI program. So most of these updates, you'll now find a description or a report out based on the recommendation that a self-assessment committee member made. And so we have 2 minutes left, but just wanted to say if anybody has any questions in regards to the updates, please feel free to just reply to all so that we can all see it, and we can tackle that way. So I'll move on to the next.
So everybody is winners here, guys. Everybody, because everybody gets a spreadsheet. I thought this was too cute. Oh my goodness, Bernice.
Okay, so yes, this is our just wrapping up our meeting. I'll be sending out the calendar invites for the weekly meetings. So from May 18th on to June. So you'll see that quite a bit. Don't be alarmed. Just kind of giving you a heads up. And then in the meantime, also just going to be gathering the data from your requests. So you'll also be seeing some emails from me there. And then just our next meeting is May 18th. So we have some time, but again, we'll be busy gathering this data for y'all. And that's it. We have like a minute to spare.
Right on. We appreciate starting and ending on time, don't we, guys? Absolutely. Well, thank you all. We really appreciate you attending, and we look forward to working with you to finish the self-assessment process. And yes, we can share the PowerPoint. Absolutely.
And the recording? Will the recording be shared too as well, or is it just for you all?
Martise,
We can
whatever.
share it.
Okay.
We can definitely share it.
All right.
We'll package it up real nice. Sorry, no cars, but just spreadsheets. And videos.
All right, you guys take care. Have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.